Good day. There's a saying that people who are happy don't have a history. Well, let me tell you, at Ogilvy Renault, we have an history and we are happy to have one. History testifies to the passage of time. It sheds light on reality, refreshes our memory, and guides us into our everyday action. This quotation, which is quite current, comes from a very famous lawyer and politician, Cicero. In other words, in parody of Lionel Groux, a renowned Quebec historian, we at Ogilvy Renault have a lot to learn from our master, the past, notre maître, le passé. I've been given the very great honor of telling you about the history of the firm. And that's no easy task. Imagine 125 years in 35 minutes. My presentation, therefore, will be an overview. For the details, you may want to refer to a book I had the privilege of writing in French on the occasions of the firm 100th anniversary in 1979, Ogilvy Renault, Chronique d'un siècle de droit. My partner and a great lawyer and a great friend, Douglas Tease, wrote the English version Chronicles of Ogilvy Renault. Unfortunately, Doug Tease passed away on August 16, 2002, at age 57. He now occupies a special place in the history of Ogilvy Renault. And I simply couldn't begin my presentation without mentioning him. It was Carter, Church, and Chapleau who founded our firm in 1879. The three lawyers had known each other since 1967, the year of the Confederation, when all the three of them were elected as conservative to the very first provincial legislature in Quebec City. Edward Carter was the oldest of the three. He had been a member of the bar since 1845. He had never stopped practicing law and had an established clientele. In June 1879, Lévi Ruggles Church and Sir Joseph Adolphe Chapleau managed to convince Carter to form a partnership with them and establish the firm of Carter, Church, and Chapleau at 40 Saint-Jean Street on the corner of Notre-Dame, next to the Notre-Dame Basilica in Montreal. It would seem that in 1879, Joseph Adolphe Chapleau was not overloaded with work because during one and the same year, he managed to serve as professor of criminal law at l'Université de Montréal and be elected Premier of Quebec, nothing less. Chapleau is said to have been the greatest speaker of his time and a criminal lawyer no one could match. Apparently, he saved 20 or so accused from a sure death by the gallows after some spectacular trials. Chapleau was a partner of the firm for 13 years, from 1879 to 1892, when he became Lieutenant Governor of Quebec. Throughout his 13 years with the firm, he never stopped being involved in politics, either as Premier of Quebec or later as the Federal Minister of Public Works, Railways and Agriculture under Sir Johnny Macdonald. The concept of a conflict of interests seems to have been foreign at the time. Chapleau established the first commercial relations with France and helped form the Crédit Foncier Franco-Canadien. Whenever businessmen from Paris wanted to establish a business in Quebec, Chapleau was always the one they contacted. His ties with France were so close that he was awarded of the Légion d'honneur. As for Edward Carter, who was a member of the Parliament in Ottawa, he passed away 4 years after the firm was established, in 1883. Levi Ruggles Church left the firm in 1887 when he accepted an appointment as a judge of the Court of Queen's Bench. Already at that time, the firm encouraged multidisciplinarity because, in addition to being a lawyer, Church was also a physician. Until 1878, 1 year before the firm was established, he was the Attorney General to Quebec, which led him to realize a long-time dream to become a QC, or Queen's Counsel. Upon carefully reading the official gazette of that time, one can see that he was in fact appointed a QC by himself on September 22, 1874, the very day he was sworn in as Attorney General. There was obviously a fourth distinguished politician who sat on the Tory benches and who played a major role in the firm's history. No, it's not the one you're thinking of, but rather John Hall. At Chapleau's request, John Hall joined the firm in 1881 to replace Carter, and he remained with the firm until 1906. In 1881, 2 years after the firm was established, Hall was already a well-known figure both outside and inside the firm. In politics, Hall was every bit as active as the founding members of the firm under the Tory banner, and he was even elected provincial treasurer. The least one can say is that the firm was well connected in those days. Hall was also a great litigator. While a partner of the firm between 1881 and 1897, Hall pleaded 3 cases before the Privy Council and 7 before the Supreme Court of Canada. But Hall was not only a litigator. As a provincial treasurer, he was able to establish close ties with the business community, and his clients included such famous individuals as Lord Strathcona and Sir William Van Horn, the founders of the CPR. One can say that he was the cement that held the firm together and allowed it to continue operating until the heavyweights arrived, that he was the bridge between the past and the future. During Hall's tenure, the firm acquired for the first time a telephone. Our number was simply 42. Later, it became 4242 and Arbor 4242. And we had the number 42 in our telephone number until September 4, 1990. A short personal anecdote. When I joined the firm as a student in 1965, we still had a cable address, which was John Hall, on our letterhead and on our business cards. We kept the address until the 80s when fax machines came out. To tell you the truth, during all that time, I didn't even receive a single cable. Hall spent the last days of his life in Calgary, where he practiced law and was alive in municipal politics. When he died in 1909, the Calgary Daily Herald noted the presence at his funeral of the entire city council, but ran the story under the unfortunate headline, "Council attends all funeral in body." (1887) was without a doubt one of the most significant years in the history of the firm. In fact, it was in 1887 that Sir Joseph Adolphe Chapleau managed to convince a young lawyer, Albert J. Brown, 26 years of age, to join the firm, which was soon to be known as Chapleau, Hall, Nichols, and Brown. Brown remained a partner of the firm until 1938, that is for 52 years. Brown was initially known as a litigator. It is somewhat paradoxical that one of the first cases this Anglophone lawyer had to plead was to defend the literary qualities of Victor Hugo. He represented a wholesaler firm from whom a bookseller had ordered several books by Victor Hugo entitled Notre-Dame de Paris. After the books were delivered, the store owner refused to pay for them, under the pretext that he had been misled by the wholesaler, who had not told him that Victor Hugo books were forbidden by the church, that they were immoral, subversive, and contrary to good morals and public order. The judge found in favor of Brown's client and stated that Victor Hugo was a great writer, poet and dramatist, and an imposing central figure in the 19th century, and that it would be absurd that a contract could create civil obligations simply because Victor Hugo sometimes painted the weakness and faults of human nature in words of greater passion and greater realism than some might think necessary or desirable. But Brown's enviable reputation in the legal community was not made on his talents as a litigator, but rather as a business lawyer. By the early years of this century, the age of mass production had created an insatiable demand for capital. The bank and trust companies provided a large part of that capital through the underwriting of securities. But as this form of financing was available only to corporations, of which there were relatively few at the turn of the century, the first step was an application for letters patent of incorporation. An entirely new group of specialists was created, corporate lawyers. In Canada, Albert Brown acquired a reputation in this area which very few of his contemporaries could match. It was Brown who, in 1899, incorporated Montreal Trust. He became a director and even a vice president of that company. His clients included such prestigious companies as Canada Cement, Dominion Bridge, Dominion Textile, Abitibi Paper, Canada Steamship Lines, Stelco, Northern Electric. When the Royal Bank of Canada moved from Halifax to Montreal in 1907, it was once again Brown and therefore the firm to whom business was entrusted. As a matter of fact, ever since that day, up to February 2005, there has always been one lawyer from Ogilvy Renault on the board of directors of the Royal Bank of Canada, the last one in line being Yves Fortier. Like all lawyers, Brown probably made his share of mistakes. One such mistake occurred early in Brown's career in May 1897. Brown represented Thomas Robertson & Co. in a dispute with the Switch Company. He made the mistake of telling the opposite party the amount of fees he was charging to his client. Let's look for a moment at the letter he received from his client. Dear sir, it's dated May 12, 1897. We have the pleasure to hand you a check for $108.78 in payment of your bill herewith, for which kindly send us receipt. Referring to your conversation with our Mr. Wilson the other night, we are not at all pleased that you should have communicated to Mr. Campbell anything at all regarding your charge in connection with this business. We always understood that our transaction with you have been on a strictly confidential nature. Our Mr. Wilson very carefully abstained from giving the Switch Company any information regarding your charges. And through you having conveyed this information to Mr. Campbell, they have had access to information that they had no right to receive, either directly or indirectly. Yours faithfully, Thomas Robertson. History didn't record whether Brown's gaffe caused the firm to lose the client, but it certainly didn't turn out to a career-threatening gesture for Brown. Brown was not an easy man to work for. His office was located right off the reception area where all the lawyers and staff had to pass each morning. He arrived early and would stand at the doorway checking who came in after 9 a.m. In 1928, the firm moved to a skyscraper, the Royal Bank building at 360 St. James Street West. Our office were at the penthouse, the 17th floor. The elevators had operators. Whenever Brown entered the elevator, he insisted that the operator taking all the way up or all the way down without stopping at any intermediate floors. Also, Brown could not endure whistling and actually struck a telephone delivery boy with his cane when the latter had dared to whistle in the elevator. He once fired an accounting clerk for whistling. I am pleased to report that the firm is more tolerant today on whistling. "1907 marks the beginning of an important chapter in the history of the firm. That was the year that George Montgomery joined the firm. The following anecdote is worth telling. At the time, George Montgomery was the head of the legal department of the Montreal Light, Heat and Power, the predecessor of Hydro-Quebec. You can surely imagine the number of cases he had to plead, whether actions on account, damage claims, or other kinds of litigation. And he pleaded all these cases himself. He had taken an action against a client of Albert Brown, but lo and behold, Brown was taking his time to file the defense. Since Brown was such an impressive figure, Montgomery didn't dare to proceed ex parte against him. He summoned all his courage and went to knock on Brown's door. He told him that if he didn't get the plea soon, the power company would fire him. This was no idle threat, and Brown replied, "Well, if you are ever fired, come and see me." Brown's word didn't fall on deaf ears. 2 months later, Montgomery joined the firm, which from then on and for the next 32 years was known as Brown, Montgomery, and McMichael. Obviously, he bought the Montreal Light, Heat and Power Company with him. That was a great source of litigation for the firm. In those years, it was not uncommon to have 60 trials per month for this client only. The Supreme Court of Canada reports show that while he was a partner of the firm from 1907 to 1951, George Montgomery pleaded no less than 32 cases before the Supreme Court. He also pleaded one before the Privy Council in London. He really built up the firm's litigation group and supervised and trained an increasing number of young associates in this area. He was a bâtonnier of the Barreau de Montréal, served as president of the Canadian Bar Association, and, of course, was a director of the Royal Bank of Canada. I am sure that at this point all of these names are familiar to those of you who have visited the Montreal office, because all of the board rooms have been named in honor of partners who have shaped the history of the firm. Robert McMichael, the last of Brown, Montgomery, McMichael triumvirate, is no exception to the rule. McMichael was the brains of the firm and a lawyer's lawyer. All his legal opinion went through him. There's a series of books bound in red in the library containing the opinions issued by the firms since 1912. Many of them were written by McMichael. His sharp legal mind enjoyed the challenges of banking and bills of exchange. He was an avid reader of the Civil Code. When he was ill in the hospital very late in his life, he brought with him a single bedside book, the Civil Code. At the end of the First World War, the firm decided to expand. One of the first recruits was Georges Phileas Vanier, a veteran of the First World War who had lost a leg in battle in Europe. The firm looked upon him as an exceptionally promising candidate with a brilliant future. The events that followed proved the firm to be right. Georges Vanier had an illustrious career which culminated in his appointment as Governor General of Canada from 1959 to 1967. After that, the firm began an intensive hiring period. Wilbert Howard, Orville Tyndale, Laddie Forsyth, Campbell Cope, Angus Ogilvy, and Jack Porteous all joined the firm. These were the fast years. Then, in 1929, came the Great Depression. I find it remarkable, not only that the firm did not lay anybody off, but also that no one's salary was reduced. As a matter of fact, for some time, the three senior partners agreed not to draw any income from the firm in order to help the associates and employees get by. Eventually, the situation returned to normal and the firm resumed its cruising speed. In 1937, Brown, Montgomery, and McMichael had 24 lawyers. At the end of the Second World War, the firm began another expansion. Frank Common Sr. became a senior partner. He had developed close ties with many wealthy European investors who considered Montreal an ideal place to invest, including Lord Beaverbrook. Actually, he was a member of the firm for 52 years, from 1917 to 1969. He was the proverbial rainmaker. He had been a professional piano player all his life, and there was always a hint of show business in his character. Under his reign, the firm grew at a breathtaking speed and was commonly known as the factory, in French, la manufacture. This allusion was by no means malicious. Large law firms were simply not in style. Already in the mid-50s, Common Howard Kate Ogilvy, Bishop and Cope was considered the largest law firm in the Commonwealth. The various fields of specialization started to take shape, be it in maritime law, real estate law, tax law under Charles Gavesey, former Deputy Minister of Revenue and father of David, or intellectual property law founded by André Forget. The firm became more and more structured. André Forget joined the firm in 1937, and he stayed with the firm for 30 years. He founded the Patent and Trademark Group, which was joined in 1956 by Joan Clark, who is still active after 47 years with the firm. He was also the one who invented the expression intellectual property to designate this sector. In 1965, he even taught me intellectual property at the University of Montreal. He was a wonderful professor. 8 of the major cases he pleaded are reported in the Supreme Court of Canada reports, and another one in the Privy Council Office reports. He did a lot of patent and trademark applications, in addition to pleading IP cases before the courts. In those days, everything was centered in Ottawa, and it was necessary to have Ottawa agents. Forget sent his work to 2 lawyers in a small firm in Ottawa who was just starting, Gordon Galling and Gordon Anderson. I wonder what became of that firm. Forget was also a good friend of Alan Sweeby, the patent agent, and the links between the 2 firms were formed in these early years. his horizons knew few bounds, and he was able to apply his brilliant intellect to any area of the law. As a matter of fact, his talents reached far beyond the law to many other areas. Learned societies frequently asked him to lecture on Greek philosophy, art, and civilization, for example. He was able to converse fluently in 4 living languages and 2 dead ones, Greek and Latin. He was known to write his pleadings in Latin, and once exchanged correspondence with Cardinal Léger in that language. In 1962, the firm moved from 360 Saint-Jacques Street into the new Place Ville-Marie building and new head office of the Royal Bank of Canada. In 1960, Guy Favreau joined the firm. He had previously been a professor of law at l'Université de Montréal and the University of Ottawa, and then Deputy Minister of Justice. The firm was proud to have landed such a talented intellectual and civil law lawyer. His reputation was so enviable that 3 years later, in 1963, he was persuaded to enter politics and was elected to the House of Commons, becoming Minister of Citizenship and Immigration in the Liberal cabinet of Lester B. Pearson. He was later named Minister of Justice, Attorney General, and leader of the government in House. Unfortunately, he fell victim to politics. He became the subject of virulent attacks from the opposition in Parliament and malicious, slanderous, and completely unfounded insinuations. Some retort, counterattack, take legal action, and manage to clear their reputation and rightfully obtain a public apology. Favreau, however, became gravely ill. In a humanitarian gesture, the government appointed him a judge so that his